Is that working okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Dave, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Jan, thank you, Ingvar, thank you, Cotswolds Distillery, for having me here. It's very kind. I'm very much honoured to be speaking in front of such an incredible selection of guests. I guess, in a way, I'm a little bit of an odd one out here. I don't have a distillery. I do have a few brands. And I come from a bartending background. And as bartenders, we're kind of mixers of flavours, and I've been doing it for nearly 20 years now, probably before that if you ask my mother, but not to much success, I suspect. We're mixers of flavours, and we do it in front of the person that we're serving that flavour to. So we are right there on the front line of creation and of delivery of the product. And so it means that if you're going to be good at bartending, you have to kind of develop a rapport and a means and a way of communicating flavour around the cocktails that you're mixing, or indeed the spirits that you're selling, that your guests can relate to, that they can understand, and that they will garner some enjoyment from, or appreciation, or they will learn something on the way. And that whole idea of communicating the product in simple terms has shaped many of the bars that I have operated, bars that I opened and that I still own. It's shaped the books that I write, and it's shaped the brands that I've created as well. So this next 20 minutes is going to be based loosely around flavour, but in the context of two of my businesses, which fortunately, given present company, are all about whiskey. So without further ado, let's begin. Now, about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a couple of bars already by this point. My business partner and I were chatting about doing a whiskey bar, and we had sort of become aware, gradually, subconsciously, over the years that led up to this point, that whiskey bars needed revamping. The whiskey industry was evolving rapidly. There were new distilleries opening, new distilleries reopening. There were range extensions occurring in old distilleries. There was diversification of different types of cereals. There were distilleries popping up in new countries, new markets, new styles of whiskey being produced. And yet, throughout all of that, the places where we went to drink whiskey hadn't really evolved all that much. Your old bottle of Croclady with the bagpipers on it kind of reminded me a little bit of that whole stigma that is still attached to Scotch whiskey, and we thought, it's time to do something about this. So the kind of mantra was whiskey for everyone. We wanted to be as inclusive as possible, remove all that kind of elitist idea that whiskey is only for people who are fortunate or blessed to have the sensory appreciation of the gods, and can afford to sip on this wonderful nectar. We wanted to democratize it, make it easier for people to gain access to the category, to make it easier for them to appreciate it once they gain access, and then to keep them there drinking it over and over again. Not like till they pass out, but you know what I'm saying. Speaking of drinking, by the way, I have drink. I'm the first one to bring drink up here, and I'm going to distribute it out, literally going to float it out to you very shortly. And I'm not sure, I've not quite worked out the mechanic of who's going to get it, but some of you are going to get it, not all of you. So, declutter the category, work out a way of communicating it in the lowest common denominator so that everyone can appreciate it. We looked at these kind of 4 different steps. That's a very quick slide, that one. Number 1, fix the atmosphere. Remove that stuffiness out of whiskey, make it a cool place that people want to hang out. We identified that young professionals in their 20s, this is in London specifically, by the way, really interested in entering whiskey, but just don't know exactly where to start. And so we needed to create a space that connected with them, that felt cool, but that was all about delivering quality whiskey. So in this bar, we actually play hip-hop rather than bagpipes. I know there's actually not many whiskey bars that play bagpipes, but let's just pretend there is, okay? It's more funny. Step 2, simplify the categories. Now, this is the most crucial of all the things that we've done at Black Rock, I think, and it's the thing I'm definitely most proud of. And certainly it's drawn from some of the previous work that went on with the Malt Whisky Flavour Map, mentioning no names, but I think there's 1 or 2 people in this audience that had something to do with that. But we wanted to try and create a language in which we could communicate whiskey that didn't involve that immediate forceful, well, this is pot stills with onion shape or ball boils and it's been matured in this cask and that, and the fermentation is this long, because it's just confusing when you initiate someone into the category. It's not to say those conversations don't come later, if they're asked for, but that's not the initial conversation we want to have with our guests. Now I'm going to talk a lot more about flavour in just a second, but I'll cover the other steps first. So step 3, communication, is kind of what I'm talking about already. We need a knowledgeable team who, when required, can draw upon that resource of information about each and every whisky that we sell, but are able to remain a kind of relaxed, informal kind of presence around the room when it's not asked for. Step 4, be exciting. We want guests to actually be like, wow, holy shit, whiskey is much, much greater, much better, more exciting, more opportunity than I ever imagined before. And I'll talk first about the exciting bit. This is how we did it. So we created a table made from half of a tree trunk. This thing weighs 5 tons. It's an English oak tree trunk that fell down about 3 years ago. Interestingly, it was a sapling when the Talisker distillery was opened, which I think was about 1830, let's go with that. Anyway, it's obviously very large, it dominates the room, bark runs underneath it, and it's just this elemental connection with something that's obviously incredibly important to whiskey, which is oak. And it meant that most of the people that come into Blackrock, by the way, the bar seats about 36 people, the table seats about 20. Most of the people get to have that tactile touch with wood. It's like those things that a lot of distilleries do in tasting sessions, where they bring a stave along, and you rub the stave and you go, oh yeah, it's like alligators and all that sort of stuff. This was actually touching this tree as you're drinking your whiskey, you're resting your glass on it. Not content with that, we were like, let's do something with it. Let's turn it into something that's actually, interactive. So we asked the guy that made it, and I often describe him as a carpenter, but that's not really fair because he doesn't build sort of door frames and stuff like that. He's obviously an artist, but an artist that works with wood. We asked him, could you cut out channels down the middle of the table, and what we'll do is we'll line it with seasoned oak, put glass over the top, and then we can put whiskey cocktails and stuff in there and actually mature them underneath this glass right in front of all of our guests. So that's what we did. So one side is lined with American oak charred, one side is European oak toasted. We alternate the drinks that go in there. We often have cocktails in, and then we'll take a cocktail out. We might even put a blended whiskey in there, and then it'll take on a little bit of that cocktail characteristic. But it becomes a focal point, it becomes a talking point, and it's easy for guests to engage them with this whole idea of maturation. The introduction of colour, the introduction of flavour from wood, and so on. The taps on the end of the table are obviously to get it back out again. Each channel holds about 17 litres, so despite only being about that wide and that deep, it's damn long, so you get 17 litres in there. We also actually have, you can't really see it that well in this picture, but you'll see it better on another picture. There's 3 water taps down the middle of that table, and then every single other table has water, filtered London tap water on draft. So it starts to communicate that idea of water. So we're really talking about elements here of whiskey. We don't grow any barley there, by the way. All right. But it's talking about the elements, what goes into making whiskey. And of course, water is often added to whiskey as well, so it's there and it's ready to go. Not getting served a glass of water in a bar is one of my massive bugbears, so it's virtually impossible for that to happen in this bar because there's free running water right in front of you at any point. So this was kind of the WAG thing. This is what we were like, hey, this is going to get people in, and my God, did it. I mean, this was the most talked about table in London for about a whole year. So we got people in, and then we needed to start getting them engaged with whiskey. And the way we did that is, like I say, by talking about flavour. The idea was that this is a radical idea. You go into every whiskey bar you've ever been in, pretty much, and you look at this wall of bottles in the back bar, and it's all arranged by whatever country it comes from, whatever region of that country, whatever distillery, the distillery expressions in order of age statement, all this kind of thing. It's just the de facto way of organising whiskey in a bar, and it really sucks. It's not working for you when you organise whiskey like that. It's doing nothing for you. It's confusing. It's confusing to me, and I've been to all of these distilleries. I know these whiskies, but I never know where to start. It's totally overwhelming. And it's overwhelming to guests as well, to people who want to understand whiskey. So we said, you know what, we're going to organise whiskey by flavour instead. So we have 3 cabinets in Blackrock. Each cabinet is split in half down the middle. And each half of the cabinet, 6 halves in total, if you're keeping up with the maths, well done, is a different flavour group. So we have smoke, fruit, balance, fragrance, spice, and sweet. We do not in Blackrock differentiate between where a whisky comes from, its price, or indeed its age statement or anything. The only way we differentiate between whisky when we're arranging it on our shelves is by what flavour group it belongs in. In addition to that, we have a kind of x-axis and a y-axis. So the higher up the cabinet the whisky is, the lighter in style it is, like things float. The lower down, the heavier in style it is. Now that often correlates to maturation, but not necessarily. You get new make whiskies that are quite weighty as well. So immediately when you come into this bar, you can kind of work out roughly where you want to be based on whatever your flavour preferences are, whatever time of day it is. And then when you're planning on mixing this as a highball or drinking it straight, a little bit of water, dare I say, putting it on ice, which actually is something I'll come back to in a second. And it's just so much more helpful than a back bar full of all these different regions and things like that. And so what it means is sometimes we have an Irish next to a Japanese, next to a grain. For example, the fragrance cabinet sometimes has Japanese whiskies, single malts, next to a grain whisky from Scotland, next to an Irish whisky. You would never normally see this in a bar, but if they are similar in flavour, they will sit next to each other. So this is great for someone who's used whiskey, but it's amazing if you know about whiskey as well, because you can walk into the bar, find a bottle you like, and within the sort of close proximity of that bottle will be other whiskies that the chances are taste the same or similar, and that you may well appreciate as well. So it becomes a tool for exploration of whiskey as well. Just to kind of hammer out that whole new kind of flavour map thing, this is basically how it works. I put a few examples up there as well to sort of show you where these things sit, as opposed to where they might normally sit, where of course all the Scotch and blends would be categorised together. And there you can see is the balanced fragrance cabinet at work. By the way, don't pay too close attention to the bottles that are in that cabinet. This was taken about 2 weeks before we opened, and someone just shoved bottles in random places. So what I don't want is you come around to me afterwards going, oh, I can see Lefroy is a heavy balanced whiskey, and it's just for show, okay? If you want to see the real deal, you know where to go. Come to Blackrock, East London. This is the menu. So the other thing we were looking at when we started kind of this whole democratisation process is looking at price as well. Of course, price is a subject that's probably going to get talked about at some point over the next couple of days as whisky prices continue to go up. We're accepting of the fact that it costs what it costs and we need to make our margin. The problem with prices of whiskies in bars is you often just don't know how much something costs until you ask. And that is off-putting for people who want to get into the category. So we said, right, we'll have a clear price system on every single bottle, and because people can walk up to the cabinets in Blackrock and browse them, it means we can display a price. So every bottle has either 1 Blackrock stuck to the neck, 2 Blackrocks, or 3 Blackrocks, and that indicates £7, £9, or £11 for a 35ml dram. In addition to that, we have about 300 whiskies at Blackrock, so by no means an absurd range, but you know, a pretty healthy range, I would say, if you can call whiskey healthy. I do. But about 10%, so let's say 30 of those whiskies are pretty expensive. Not naming any names, but they might be from Japan and places like that. And so they get a gold rock, and that means, yeah, you need to ask, and if you need to ask, they need to be prepared to pay, because there's some expensive ones in there. But like I say, 90% of our whiskies fit within that £7, £9, £11 budget. And so again, for these people who are trying to understand whiskey, they don't know how much an 18-year-old this or that might cost, they can immediately go, right, that sits within my 2 Blackrocks budget, and it's in the light smoke category, this is perfect whiskey for me. Now, also, on top of that, we reflected this in our cocktails as well. So all of our cocktails are whiskey-based, again, using whiskies from all over the world. But we wanted to sort of stand by this idea of classifying flavour in whiskey, and so we reflected that in the names of our cocktails as well. So we don't have traditional kind of fancy names for cocktails. We simply use the same descriptors that we use in the cabinets. So we separate our drinks into highballs and cocktails. Highballs being long drinks, they're only served in one type of glass, which is a highball glass, and cocktails being either drinks served on the rocks or straight up. So like your old fashions and Manhattan type things. And then within each of those categories we have a balanced cocktail, a fruit cocktail, a spice cocktail, smoke, and so on. So again, it's getting people to think about the length or the intensity of that drink, and then what flavour group they want it to sit in. And people love it. They find it extremely easy to choose, it makes them more relaxed, and ultimately, when people are going to bars, they don't want to be stressed out by complex decisions, by things that are going to make them feel awkward, by having to front up £30 for a whiskey that they didn't realise it cost £30, that they don't want to embarrass themselves in front of their mates, and so on. These are what some of the drinks look like. Now, you'll probably start to get thirsty, so let's just throw one of these out here. You're going to catch it, yeah? Because it's going to knock glasses over if you don't. Good catch. I know the Cairo guys are getting thirsty because I saw their hands shaking. Don't worry, you'll get one. So just an idea of what I was super simple serves. I mean, we inadvertently, Black Rock sort of became a bit of a kind of zen. Let's talk about elements already. It originally intended to be kind of film noir look, and it ended up being more than a little bit Japanese. But I think that's partly because of the use of materials. We have the oak, we have cork, we have marble, we have gold, we have beautiful thin glassware, and yeah, it's just kind of a pretty cool place to go to, I think. I'm biased, obviously. So, no, we are not finished actually. I've got another thing I want to talk to you about as well, which is what just landed in your hands over there. So we had this whole kind of epiphany of flavour when it came to whiskey and Black Rock. We were like, it's really got legs, this. And you know, it's gone on to win Best Specialist Bar in the UK twice, which means it's the best whiskey bar in the UK twice. And we thought, yeah, we're really on something here with whiskey. People are engaging this idea of flavour, and more than flavour, accessibility into this category. And we kind of identified that one of the next trends we see, not just in whiskey, but in alcohol, and not just in alcohol, but in drinks and in food, is convenience. You're seeing it now with Uber Eats and all these kind of things. People want quality stuff, but they also want it to be convenient and on their terms. And so about 2 years ago, although I think we've been talking about it longer, we kind of came up with this idea of a whiskey subscription service. Now, whiskey subscriptions are nothing new, of course. They're all over the place, and lots of places are doing it. There we go. And so we were like, you know, we need to kind of have an edge with this thing. We need to do something a little bit different. So we came up with the idea. We'll go to each distillery that we feature every single month on this monthly delivery of whiskey. We'll go and visit the distillery. We'll take a drone up there. We'll film the whole distillery, capture some great footage, edit it, and that will be kind of the added value. And we worked with this whole idea for quite some time. And something didn't quite feel right. We were like, this is just not taking it to the next level. It doesn't feel innovative. It feels like we're kind of recycling old strategies of getting people drinking whiskey at home and getting subscription payments. We looked at the coffee industry and everything. We just couldn't, we were scratching our heads all the time. And at the same time, we were in the process of sorting out packaging. We were taking glass bottles, filling them up, posting them all over the place. 50% of them were getting smashed. We were unable to get postage costs below £2.50 for a single 50ml glass bottle. So immediately you've got £2.50 just going straight to the post company, Royal Mail in this case. We were like, this just doesn't work. Anyway, one day I was feeding my little baby daughter. I know, you never thought I'd end up talking about children in the context of whiskey, but here we go. I was feeding my daughter Robin her little pouch of baby food. And it was one of those eureka moments. It's like, hold on a second. I'm sure you could put more than just baby food inside one of these pouches. Why don't we put whiskey inside the pouch? There we go, someone else will have one. Catch. Middle table's doing well so far. They do double up as boomerangs. Crack them open, there's actually 2 in each one, so you can share it around. Came up with this idea of putting whiskey in a pouch. Partly because it would fit through a letterbox, which it does, which means it costs us 70p to post it, which means it costs us £1.70, £1.80 less than it costs all of our competitors to post their whiskey. Partly because it's unbreakable, like, I'm not going to stand on it because it breaks me so embarrassing, but we have done standing tests that we have on film, okay, just take my word for it. Get it on YouTube or something. And partly because it would make people stand up and look at whiskey in a different way. Not as something with kind of, you know, a matte-coloured label on it with all this kind of oldie world writing and all this information that's confusing, but as something that can look cool, can make you take a step back and go, oh shit, is that whiskey in that? Now that only works, of course, if you back it up with good quality whiskey. And let's just send this one out as well. Right, this is going to go back in the room. You ready? Yes! They'd never know we rehearsed that, eh? Now you've got to back it up with good quality juice. There's no point in doing it otherwise. If the product is rubbish and we package it in a kind of fun way, then everyone will just come down on us like a ton of bricks. So we made sure the product was good. So for £7.95 a month, or £84 a year, you get sent 50 ml of whiskey through your door with delivery included, which is far less than you'd pay for it in Black Rock, let's put it that way, and it's only a little bit more than you'd pay for it if you were going out and buying an entire bottle of it. And you can see from some of the whiskies we've featured, this is not bad stuff. You know, we've bought casks from Stephenson distillery, of course a very young whiskey, at great expense, and sent that out to our customers. Where things like Royal Lochingar Distillers Edition, for an 18-year-old, I mean that retails for 90 quid a bottle. So it's good stuff. We back it up with the drone footage, like I say, and I wanted to show you a video, but I can't because we can't play it. But it doesn't matter. But what you can't really see here is tasting notes, and I wanted to bring this back to flavour again. This is how we communicate tasting notes on whiskey mead packaging, and it's just 3 simple icons that don't necessarily mean exactly what they look like, but they give you an impression of what this whiskey might taste like. They give you, without using words, it's international, you get an idea of what this might be like. So Stratford Cast 13, we've got chocolate, hazelnuts, and malt drink. And it allows us to sort of provoke that conversation around, oh, what's that icon? Okay, that looks like a bar of chocolate. What does this smell? What does this taste like? Rather than kind of really evocative language and all this long descriptive stuff, which, believe me, I'm guilty of writing. I've done it many times in my books, but there's a different context altogether. And it's just breaking it down to those simple 3 flavour descriptors. We talked about doing the Black Rock method as well. We talked about doing this is smoky, this is light smoky, this is heavy fruit, and that's not a bad idea, but for some reason iconography felt better on this. And yes, it's going well. We had 1,000 subscribers in the first 8 weeks, and it's still growing. We're going to be going international by the end of the year, and that means moving into other European markets. We're also going to put extensions onto what whiskies we're packaging, looking into global whiskies, and not exactly how that's going to work, I'm not sure yet, because we need to travel to these distilleries and take photos and do drone footage, but we'll see. We've actually done independent bottling of some of the Stratford stock that we bought, which is pretty cool, because no one else has bottled that yet, apart from Stratford. And we're even talking to distilleries who do not traditionally independently bottle their whiskies. We're changing the way that old distilleries, old institutes are thinking about how they're going to get liquid on lips. There you go. We've both said it now, so it's okay. And most distilleries are extremely open to this idea of disrupting the way in which people consume whiskey at home. So we're really hopeful for this business, and yeah, I'm basically done. I'm happy to take a load of questions off Dave and you guys. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tris. Some fantastic stuff there. If you haven't been to Black Rock, do go and do get small packets of whiskey delivered through your letterbox and jump up and down in them if you wish.
I said you can stand on them. You can't
yes,
jump.
oh, you can't jump.
We're very clear on that, okay?
Or serve them to your 2-year-old child. Okay. Responsibility in all things. It strikes me that one of the themes that's kind of underpinning all of this is a suggestion that we're guilty of overcomplicating whiskey. So I mean, really is simplicity the key?
I think, I love all of the technical know-how as much as the next person in this room, and I'm sure all of you do. And I think that stuff is really valuable to people who are already initiated into the category. We want to hear that because we're geeks, because we're curious about it, curious in plugging books now as well. Doing well so far.
You are. You're doing very well.
We want to understand all that information because it deepens the appreciation of a liquid when you understand what production facets have made it taste the way it does. But for new initiates, that stuff's overwhelming, and I think the initial conversation, yes, needs to be along a simpler line of thought. Yeah.
And also, just in terms of like Black Rock, especially, it's a phenomenal idea. It really works. Has it been replicated? Well, is it replicable? Clearly, I haven't had a drink. I can say that. Have you seen it not being copied, but this approach being picked up by other whiskey?
I was asked that question just earlier today, actually. So the answer is, I damn well hope it's replicable, because see, I can't say it, I must have had a drink. Replicable. There you go. So I hope it is, because we are planning on opening more, and we need to be able to replicate it ourselves. But no, I have not seen it replicated fully anywhere. I've heard of it being replicated in that way. The thing is, as I've sort of explained, there are 3 or 4 different aspects to it that make it quite different to a traditional whiskey bar. You've got the table, obviously, you've got the ambience, the music, the lighting, you've got the categorisation of whiskey by flavour, you've got the simplification of price point, you've also got the fact we don't have a bar in there. There is no bar, by the way. The bartenders, if you can call them that, they're more like sommeliers, just wander around the place, integrating with the people who are sat there. So, any one of those things could be replicated, and I expect some of those things do exist in other bars. But to do all of them really would be a full-on copy, and I think we would have heard about it. So.
Yeah. But in general, what's the industry reaction been? Obviously people are giving you whiskey, but does the industry come to you and go, wow, that's an amazing idea, or are they kind of, yeah, you're just a bit mad?
No, the industry reaction is really good, and it is surprising now you sort of mention it that someone hasn't taken some aspects of it and gone, oh, this obviously works, why don't we do it more? And I mean, I deliver seminars on Black Rock every other week, pretty much, and everyone is extremely receptive to the kind of thought that we put into it and the execution of it. And I mean, I always think there's a little bit of luck in opening bars. You can kind of think it as much as you like, and we've had other bars that haven't worked so well, and I've put just as much heart and soul and mind resources into, and they don't pay off. And then sometimes you just hit that magic sweet spot, and sometimes it's timing that is important for that too. And we definitely hit it with Black Rock, and from both a consumer and industry reaction, it's been overwhelmingly positive. Yeah.
Any thoughts? Any questions from? I thought you might have had a question. Okay.
Hi, Tristan.
Hello.
So, Black Rock Bar, with the simplicity and the structure of the pricing, has that actually encouraged consumers, do you think, to upsell themselves because now they know what everything on the shelf costs? And if so, was that actually part of your motivation in doing it in the first place?
I just thought about it then when you said it, actually. Do you know what? I mean, in all honesty, I don't work there enough to be able to fully comment on that. It has been suggested by Tom, our excellent bar manager, who some of you have met, that people probably do explore more expensive whiskies because they know they're not too expensive, and they sometimes feel, oh, you know what, I've had 2 7-pound drams tonight, I'm going to treat myself to a 9 before I leave. And it's in that same vicinity of flavour as the ones I've had already. And yeah, I think people probably do have that internal dialogue with themselves and then land up buying something more expensive. But it's very astute of you to kind of recognise that might be happening. And no, I hadn't thought of it before. And definitely it wasn't intentional, obviously. Oh no, it was. No.
Yeah, I think we've all had that kind of internal dialogue when we've been thinking about contemplating maybe just one more dram. Talking about contemplating one more thing, one more question? Yeah. Behind you. Behind you. It's like pantomime.
On the retail side of things, when you talk about convenience, do you see a conflict between convenience and translating the value or communicating the value in whiskey to someone who doesn't know whiskey to start with?
This is why I wish I could have played a video, because our videos that we make to match up with each patch, actually you've got old patches there, but they've now got links to the website and QR codes that link to an app. So as soon as you scan it on the app, it plays the video of the distillery that you're drinking. And it's a 1 minute, like a trailer for the distillery, with upbeat music. Our editor is insanely good, and it introduces some of those elements of production that add value to that drink that you're drinking. We don't want to send someone this and this to be the end of it, and they go, all right, have a photo 16, cinnamon, apple, and honey, done. We want them to explore it further, to potentially buy a bottle, to get onto our website and look at the video, see what the distillery looks like, see what the distiller looks like, see what it looks like from the air, inside, and we research these distilleries heavily. We speak to the ambassadors or the people that work there, or we used to use one of English books, and that gets translated into the films, and we want that information to be accessible, but for it to be valuable to the people that we're selling the whiskey to.
What's the feedback you've received so far on doing that?
Well, we get a fair bit of interaction on social media. We're pretty big on our Instagram feed. Again, we communicate a lot of the more interesting production facets of the whiskey from each and every month. And so we get a lot of feedback coming from there. But about 50% of our subscribers watch the video. We'd like that to be higher. And I mean, the only other kind of feedback I can really tell you besides individual comments is that we're still growing. We have more new subscribers every day than we have people unsubscribing, which presumably means it's good.
I look forward to seeing it in the Norwegian Monopoly. Matt, probably the last question actually, so I got 50, Matt.
Is it going to be that bad, huh? So a question about BlackRock itself. How often do you get, we call it in the States, we call it like dealer's choice, like bartender will pick. So let's say if you know that within one category, let's say the balanced, and you tend to like on the lower set of shelves, are people, can they taste one of these and then they go back to that shelf and then find another brand and pick it, or do they ask for the expertise of the people that are working there?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we don't normally let people just try bits and pieces. They need to commit and buy, otherwise we'll be forever sampling 5 mils of this and 5 mils of that. But yeah, there's a lot of that consultation process that takes place. And although the space was set up for people to walk up to cabinets and go, all right, I want that one. Actually, a lot of the time it happens with the bartender kind of in between that decision-making process. So someone may come in and say, yeah, well, I'd like something light and fruity. And the bartender will say, right, cool, if you're good with the £9 dram, then I've just got this in, or I've just got that in, this is a little bit more to this side of fruit, this is wine cup, whatever, sherry glass. And so that there is still that, we don't want people to come in and just be like robotic and go, that, sit down, cool, I know what this should taste like, it tastes like that, next one please. There is still very much a dialogue and the bartender is trained to sit in between all of that.
So it's like a usual interaction.
It's typical, yeah.
And so I can do this. It's not the last question, it's that one. How do you, I mean, given the number of whiskies which are released every week, how do you manage the range and how do you avoid dust gatherers?
Yeah, sure. Dust gatherers aren't too much of a problem as it happens. Part of the reason we're keeping the range within sensible kind of level was we didn't want bottles to just sit there days on end. We have got some expensive ones that we're looking at doing break-even bottle service. So we've just done one of the Yamazaki Mizunaras on break-even. Because that was gathering dust, because no one wants to pay whatever, 150 quid for a glass of it. So we're doing that, but for the most part, nothing really gathers dust in Black Rock. We get a really great turnover of product. But in terms of picking new stuff, it's quite cool actually, because the cabinets sort of almost describe what we need to pick next. When something runs out and we feel like we've run its course, well, that's left a space on the second shelf down in the fragrance cabinet. So we need to source a fragrant whiskey that's going to go in there. We are really limited to that because each section only has a certain amount of space, and it doesn't allow us to go, oh shit, half the whiskies in there are smoky.
Yeah.
Because they're not. 1/6 of the whiskies in that bar are smoky, exactly.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen,